This is Social Leopards. I'm Bea.
And I'm Beth. A leopard is a solitary creature living in the jungle, but often not seen or noticed. Are you a solitary creature trying to navigate the social jungle?
This show explores loneliness and the many ways forward. Welcome to Social Leopards.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am Beth.
And I'm Bea.
And today, it's just us. Yes.
Fun!
For season 3. And
Woo-hoo.
we are going to be talking about emotional wounds. And today, our focus is on abandonment wounds. So I did a little bit of research before we got going on this. And I wanted to know how this concept of emotional wounds had actually started. And I thought I was going to get some book from the 70s or the 80s and learn that emotional wounds was a relatively new concept. And I was very wrong. The concept of emotional wounds dates all the way back to the 1600s, and it was actually a Roman Catholic priest whose name escapes me at the moment, but it is attributed back to that, where the emotional wounds of your childhood creep up and begin to impact the way that you behave as an adult. And the importance of recognizing and addressing the emotional wounds of your past is actually just historically known to be something that we should all be aware of and able to find our healing journey on over time. So I found that very interesting because I don't think that even as I was growing up that self-help or I've certainly never heard anything about emotional wounds from your childhood. I never heard that.
Or even connected to the church.
Or
in
connected
a way.
to-
We talk about
No.
sin, we talk about forgiveness, we talk about obedience, but I rarely have heard, in being a recovering Catholic, I've rarely heard the term emotional wounds
Right.
connected to religion. I don't think I've ever heard it, so that's fascinating.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a very apparently progressive individual who came up with this.
Yeah. And I think across all religions, there are certain similar ties to kindness and compassion
Right.
and those types of themes. So it makes sense to me. But anyway, that was just my little opening factoid to
Oh, I like it.
bring to the table. As you're working to improve your best self, to feel confident enough to tackle loneliness and tackle it head on, I think it's important to get out there and find meaningful connections. And you can do that by prioritizing your own happiness and your own well-being. That's where I landed on this. And I think one way that we can do that is to tend the wounds from our past. And today, that is abandonment. And I think it shows up in a lot of different ways.
I think it does. Yeah, you're right. I think
Yeah.
that's a big reason why people react the way that they do, because they have been abandoned or felt abandoned in the past, and then they react in certain situations, maybe in a negative way, or perhaps draw people away from them because of those unconscious feelings. Because
Right.
it's always unconscious.
I'm going to read a little something here. So an abandonment wound forms when a child experiences significant loss or absence of a caregiver, whether physically or emotionally. It can cause attachment issues, anxiety, and a deep-seated fear of being alone. So all three of those things are pretty deep, right? So an abandonment wound is a deep emotional feeling of left behind, or it can also present as unloved or unimportant even is a form of abandonment. If you're dismissed consistently throughout your childhood, if your voice is not heard, or if someone's always making you feel like everything you say is not relevant to a situation, right?
Yeah, like you have no influence over anything.
Exactly. Right. So did you experience any abandonment, do you think, as you were growing up, or is that not one that you dealt with?
So I would say neglect and rejection. Probably neglect, because my parents were always working. And I think I'd mentioned, maybe I mentioned in an episode, a prior episode, that at one point I thought, even though my parents weren't divorced, I almost felt like a child of divorce, because every summer my parents worked and we were with my grandparents who took care of us for 4 months almost. And on occasion, my parents would come on the weekend. It was 100 miles away. We stayed upstate New York, but sometimes they couldn't come. And looking back, I never thought about that, but I thought, God, that's really odd. We accepted it. My brother and I did. We had friends, but I look back and that was abandonment. It was, I'd say, bordering on neglect. I don't know about rejection, but definitely neglect.
Yeah.
But it was circumstantial neglect. I don't think it was conscious neglect.
Gotcha.
They had to work. We were lucky we could at least be with grandma and grandpa, but
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Some of the common signs that might indicate you have an abandonment wound, as we've been discussing, include that fear of rejection. And sometimes that is going to present as a constant worry about the people that you care about and that they might actually leave you and not come back, right? I feel personally that also is when it's difficult to establish friendships or you're afraid to put yourself out there because of fear of rejection. And that's another thing. If you experienced, I think the closest thing I have is that because I moved around a lot, it was hard to make those connections in the first place because I was going to be the one who abandoned. But it was still a wound that impacted me because as I started to become more aware as I grew up, it became harder and harder to put myself out there and to socialize. I knew that it was temporary, and that was really hard.
And how many times did you tell me that you moved before you were like in college?
Oh gosh, I'd have to count, but it's 7 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's not a lot of time at each location to be able to establish any kind of a long-term bond with someone.
But you still did, because as the second one of those signs is low self-esteem, you must have had a pretty good self-esteem so that you were able to try at least.
Yeah, I think it ebbed and it flowed over time, honestly. I don't think I was aware of it as a young child, and so it was easier for me to bounce back as a younger child. But everyone experiences awkward years in their, I don't know, preteens and teens when you start to just become socially aware, right? And kids start to become a little bit more mean-spirited.
Yes.
And when you're the new kid, you're going to be the subject of things that are not completely nice in a school environment, right?
Yeah.
You're going to maybe be subject to bullying or maybe be subject to just feeling ostracized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Low self-esteem is feeling unworthy or feeling not good enough. Did you ever feel not good enough when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah. I think there was a lot of feelings that were related to being not typically American, being like in between American and Ukrainian and not understanding all the norms and just feeling that I was missing something. Maybe I was less prepared. I didn't have the best outfit or this. So yes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's almost the same thing that I would experience with new people. When you get that feeling of you don't measure up, that feels really uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. I get that totally. And I think everyone experiences it to a certain extent. I'm just not sure. I think people with cultural differences experience it to a much greater extent.
Yeah. I'd say it was better when I was with my ethnic group. It was probably more prevalent, or I felt it more when I was with, my American quote unquote friends, although we're not really all American. We all come from somewhere, but yeah, the ones that didn't speak Ukrainian.
So another way that abandonment wounds could present themselves is a feeling of distrust. Being able to trust others is important to establishing strong relationships.
Yep.
So if you can't do that, then the quality of the relationship can be low quality.
That's true.
Or unstable, right?
Yes.
By definition. I know that's what happened to me as I started to age, is that my relationships were a little more tenuous because I knew I would be the abandoner rather than being the abandoned one. So it's a different form, but the wound was still there. I don't know. It's probably some other wound, but that's the closest parallel I can draw. And I think my parents were just, you'll adjust, you'll adapt, you'll be fine.
That's what parents do, right?
Yeah.
They just have to move on. They're busy. Just move on. Yeah.
But no real acknowledgement of how hard it is to pick up and move away. And it wasn't until I was an adult when I was talking to my mom, and she absolutely hated every move, except for the one where we ended up moving really close to where her parents lived. Of course, that makes sense.
Was she close to them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, then they gave her some support. So I feel like that would have been an impetus to move there or be happy to move there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I was not consciously aware. I'm sure there was some kind of subconscious, because there was a little bit of turmoil sometimes in the relationship where mom wouldn't be super happy. And I think that was over some of these moves. I feel like we didn't have the greatest communication growing up. My dad, I love him dearly with all my heart, even now. And he's not been on this earth for a while, but he was very passive and he loved to just be the person to say everything's going to be okay. And everything was brushed under the rug. Didn't really talk about our feelings.
I think
Yeah.
my father's the same way.
Yeah. So
It
not
must be a
talking.
cultural thing.
Yeah, it could be. I don't
Yeah.
know. But not talking about feelings doesn't really help when you're
No.
actually feeling pain.
No, it doesn't.
So another common sign that you might have an abandonment wound includes emotional instability. That's experiencing intense and fluctuating emotions. I think we all feel that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Especially if you're not having the best day, when you're tired or you're sad because something happened and maybe you haven't been able to decompress. So you're taking that, or something happened at work and you come home and you're just not feeling good. You're stressed out.
Another one is anxiety and depression. So that can be an outcome of how your emotional wound is presenting itself. That can especially be important in relationship situations.
And it's a good idea to think about how you're feeling and take inventory and do something about it, because you are going to be relating, you're going to be putting that onto your family and affecting them with that emotion unwittingly if you don't address it, and probably create problems unnecessarily or get into fights that you maybe wouldn't want to.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that comes from self-protection, right? I think that's probably the factor that we all want to preserve our emotions to the greatest extent possible. So all of these things start to pile upon one another.
They do. Oh, and this overreaction to minor issues is another one. I feel like that happens a lot when you're extremely stressed out. You're just so stressed that you're just an overreaction, things you would never even react to in the past.
Do you think that overreaction has to do with, I want to get on top of this situation before it gets a hold of me?
Possibly, but I think maybe. But I think if you were going to be proactive, I don't think you would overreact because you'd be preparing. It's more like things build up and you haven't addressed them, then you just blow up.
Ah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think you're right. I wasn't really sure how to interpret that one, but another problem that can creep up is avoidance of intimacy. So difficulty getting close to others or avoiding deep connections. And that deep connection is where you're at risk, right? And you're at your most vulnerable, because if you have that fear of being abandoned, I think that's where that sets in, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think yeah, that makes sense.
And then the last one on our list, of course, is chronic loneliness, and is one of the reasons that we picked up the abandonment wound to talk about. Yeah. It is a lonely place to be, to feel abandoned and to feel like you are not loved. And it makes it very difficult to walk into a social situation and feel confident. Yeah. And so that's just really rough. Okay, so that's all of the signs and symptoms of what could be perceived as an emotional wound. But more importantly, we want to talk about what can heal this wound. And it's, of course, a very deeply personal journey.
Right.
But here are some strategies that might help as you are on a journey of self-discovery and healing from an abandonment wound. Do you want to start us out?
So we already talked about self-awareness, developing self-awareness. We talk about that, how it's affecting your relationship, mindful practices, meditation. Therapy is another good one. And I think when you look for therapy, you can go on Mental Health America, and there's also BetterHelp, and you can specifically Google abandonment or loneliness, and you can find people who are really expert in that field.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're working on self-awareness, I think an often used strategy, and one that we offer up a lot, is journaling, right? Meditation can be helpful, those mindfulness practices that you already talked about. And that can help you understand, learn how to manage those emotions that you feel.
And of course, building healthy relationships. We've talked about that, I think, many times. Surrounding yourself with supportive, positive people to counteract those feelings of abandonment and help you feel secure.
Yeah. Self-compassion, of course, is so important. Being gentle with yourself is so essential to making sure that you're tending to your wounds and making sure that you're addressing the pain that you feel. It takes time. It isn't like just, I recognize that I have this abandonment wound.
And tomorrow I'm going to feel better.
Yes.
Yeah. And the boundary one, that's huge. Setting boundaries, which is really tough. I'd say that is something that's hard for me sometimes, especially in ethnic families. There's a big like a big emphasis on taking care of your family and sometimes going above and beyond even when you can't. And that's something that is a big sometimes struggle for me, but it's an important skill, I think,
Yeah.
to be able to set healthy boundaries.
And you said something a while back that I want to bring back to the forefront that addresses both of those things, both the self-compassion and the setting boundaries, is when you're having negative thoughts about how you feel, one of the things you can do is turn it around and think, would I say or think these things if it was a friend of mine that was coming to me with the same problem? How would I speak to that friend?
Yeah.
Because often we are our own biggest critics, right?
Yes, for sure.
And so we need to think about how we would address that same pain if I was someone else.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Putting yourself into somebody else's, like, changing positions. It's true.
Yes.
When you're giving somebody else advice, it's always better advice. Almost saying, okay, what advice would I give my friend? And then I should take that same advice.
Yeah, yes. I was talking to someone earlier today, actually, and they were down on themselves and they were feeling not very compassionate towards themselves. And I used an example of a time when I didn't feel great about my weight and the way I looked and how I'm starting to look older.
Join the
And
club.
then immediately the person shifted and they were like, I think you look great. And you're so hard on yourself. You shouldn't be so hard on yourself. And I took that moment to say, you're right. I shouldn't be so hard on myself. So why are you so hard on yourself?
Oh, there you go.
Like I turned it around a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to shed negative feelings upon yourself and then be compassionate with others. So why don't we spend that time being compassionate with ourselves? I just don't get it sometimes. But I find myself doing the same thing. It would be the pot calling the kettle black if I said, I feel wonderful about myself all the time.
We wish
every
we did.
day.
I know that. I'd like to get there. That's the goal. But
it is. But we all have down days, right?
Yes. Look, my favorite one, positive affirmations.
Oh, mine too.
We know about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Positive affirmations can help counteract that negative self-talk a little bit. Because guess what, everybody? You are worthy.
And you are the best.
Yes.
And you will do the best. And you will always be at your best.
Yes. And you're enough. Yeah. Just the way you are. That's another conversation I had recently with someone about how they were feeling down on themselves. And I'm like, but I appreciate everything about you just the way you are. Why do you feel like you have to change? It's okay.
Yeah. But everyone, we perceive ourselves differently than other people perceive us. So it's good to get another view. Somebody saying, hey, it's not as bad as what you're thinking. Did you think about this?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So the last one, would you want to do it or you want me to?
Engaging in activities you love. Yes, I love tennis. I love skiing. I love social activities. What else? There's so many things. Eating's fun. Eating isn't actually an activity.
So I think the bottom line is participate in activities that bring you fulfillment and joy. Fulfillment, like food-wise?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great
Chocolate.
word. Yes, splurging every once in a while.
Yes, every once in a while.
And not denying yourself every minute of every day. There are so many of us out here right now today that are on some sort of a diet plan or some sort of weight management or exercise plan, and it's the hardest thing to keep going.
You can't just constantly be on a diet. You have to indulge once in a while.
And I used to be that person who, if I made one mistake during the day, I used that as an excuse to be bad, really bad, for the rest of the day.
That's good. I like that. No, I'm kidding.
And so now what I do is I pick myself up and I dust myself off and I just start from go again. And I'm like, okay, that was a moment and I'm not going to beat myself up about that moment. And gosh, was that ice cream good or whatever it is. And my favorite
hope you
food,
enjoy it if you have that moment.
Yes. Just so you know, my favorite food in the entire world is cake. Preferably like wedding cake.
Wedding cake?
But I can only go to so many weddings in a year.
That's right. So
and use that as an excuse.
What flavor?
Just like
any vanilla, chocolate?
Vanilla wedding cake. I mean, like vanilla. Wedding cake.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll eat almost any kind of cake as long as it doesn't have coconut on it.
Okay. What about that? What is it? The tres leches cake.
Yeah.
I love that cake.
Tiramisu. Oh. Now I'm getting hungry.
Oh, okay.
But
good to know.
Having those moments of enjoyment over something that might be a little decadent or retail therapy, as long as you can pay up pay it back, afford it.
Yeah.
We don't want to get too crazy and say, hey, go max out a credit card. That's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But to buy yourself a little something.
For sure.
If you do lose that 10 pounds, then, go buy that shirt that you were looking at that looked horrible last time you tried it on.
Right.
It might look better this time. And then you can reward yourself with putting on that shirt and feeling happy about it. I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, when we are feeling that pain of abandonment, we need to do these things that are kind to ourselves and remind ourselves who's in charge of our happiness.
Yeah. That's a very good point. We are always in charge of our happiness. People can enhance our happiness, but you cannot expect someone to make you happy or sad or whatever. You have to do it for yourself.
Right. So finding that safety and security inside of you is the most important thing that you can do for yourself. And when you start to feel confident in that, then you draw others to you who also are seeking that same feeling of comfort and confidence. And it is the hardest thing to do, but it is worth the journey.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. And I think that is all we had to say on that topic today.
Yeah, I think we've said it all.
Yes, we have. So until next week, everybody, have a good one.
Take care.
Hey, social leopards. Don't slink back into the jungle quite yet. We have 2 important messages to share. First, remember to like this episode, drop us a comment, and if you haven't done it yet, follow this show or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can reach us on social media. You can also email share@socialleopards.com to contact us privately. All links are in the show notes. We love and appreciate hearing from those who listen to the show.
Second, we want you to know that this show is not intended to be a replacement for professional therapy. If you are struggling or if you need to interact with another person, check out the show notes for resources. Thanks for listening.